Striped veneers can be used in so many ways with polymer clay. I really hope you enjoy my class and learn some of the techniques I use to make veneers. Some of the project's construction are covered, but mostly it's just about beautiful striped veneers and the way I make them. Enjoy my class. My name is Jan Montarsi, and I hope my class brings you some insights into the way I work, some new skills and techniques that I use when making my veneers. Hopefully these veneers you can use in any of your projects. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and the longer the playtime, the better. For this first part of the video, I wanted to start with the basics. Having a striped block cane can be useful in so many projects, and learning how to use it as a veneer by stretching it out and keeping your stripes shape is important also. So this is just going to be a little basic on black and white stripes, but you can use any two colors. All of my clay for this part is rolled out on a number 2 on my atlas. And I have white and I have black. These are all on a number 2. One thing, and I don't know if the camera will pick it up, I add a tiny bit of blue to my white. It gives it a pop and makes it look more white than it actually is, and gets rid of that yellow tinge that this being Primo clay, but other brands have. So we're going to start first with a white sheet and a black sheet. Once again, this is number 2 on my pasta machine, my Atlas pasta machine. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut with my big blade 2 equal squares. And then you're going to stack them. And whenever I put 2 sheets of clay together, I always try to attach one to a piece of paper, at least a little bit. Line them up and start at one end and slowly let it down and drop the other end. Got a little chunk there. Pressing out all the air. Trim away the excess and pull it apart. Now you can make these stripes any size, any thickness you want. We're going to be stretching these out, and typically they may expand. So if you think you're going to be stretching out far, make them a little narrower. That was the wrong side of my blade. All right, so now we're going to cut this in half and stack. Now we have 4 layers. And we're going to cut this in half again. And you can measure if you like. I always just eyeball things. I'm not denting the clay. I also leached my clay, which I'll show you a few pictures on leaching. The fastest way to leach your clay is to roll it to a 4 or a 5 on your pasta machine, layer it between clean copy paper sheets, and sit on it for about 10 to 15 minutes. After you're done, you recondition the clay because it will be drier on the outside than it is in the inside. It may separate and shred while you're conditioning it, but keep going, it'll be fine. Leaching your clay makes it much more firm and easier to work with in some cases, like caning. I'm going to cut this in half one more time. Okay, now I'm going to trim this up. And usually I'm much more careful than this. And I don't have that much waste. Cut that off a little bit more. Now, you can see these stripes are different thicknesses. This one is an old one. I'm not going to use it because it's very old. It's Kato clay. And I pulled it out of a box just for an example. And I'm going to use this Primo clay. Now, the hardest thing is cutting even stripes. And I use a slicer. I use my Lucy slicer. But I'm going to try to show you a way to make even stripes. They need to be a little thicker. And just take your time. Seesaw down, watching your sides. Now that got a little wrinkled. I'm going to pull it back out a little bit and straighten it out. And usually I also wait. So now I have two stripes. But if I put these together and they're different thicknesses, and they're different thicknesses in different areas of each stripe, they're going to stretch and get all wonky because the machine's going to make it flat. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have two craft sticks taped to a tile. You really want to make sure your clay is stuck to a clean tile. And there's a big dip right there. It's taller than my wood, but you really have to have it stuck so that you can cut. And a very sharp blade is necessary. That way you'll get even slices. That way you can get a nice even slice all the way around if you don't have a slicer machine. I'm going to use my slicer machine. Get this on the camera here. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Every slicer has a gap at the back, or at least the Lucy ones. So I just put a big block of scrap clay and I just leave it there all the time. I'm going to put my stripe block up to it and press it down to the surface and back against the clay. And I'm going to get a little tile here. Make sure your stripes are in a vertical position. And press it real good against the back. Then I take my blade cover off. This is a tool I make. And we're going to first get up to where we get an even cut. Having a slicer will get you the most out of your canes or blocks or even Makumi. Okay, so I'm just bringing it right up to where I can cut a slice and get a nice sharp straight edge. And there's a nice thin sheet. Now you can use them that way. I'm going to go for a little bit thicker because what I'm going to show you. And I have a little dot here. That was 1 turn. I'm going to go 1.5 turns. Actually, that was 2 turns. So I'll just stay with 2 turns. Half turn, a whole turn, half turn, whole turn. That's 2 turns. And I'm going to go one more time. 2 turns. All right, so now I have 3 nice even slices. And we're going to put them together. Matching up the colors so they stay in order. Now stripes may get wonky now, but when you stretch stripes out, they get straighter. So I'm going to take a piece of patty paper and I'm just going to go on those seams and make sure they're well attached. Stick the whole thing to the paper. And I'm working on poster board, cardstock. It's a little forgiving. I got a little smudge. Now this is my back side. Now the next thing I want to do, I want to put this through my pasta machine and stretch it out. But having those seams there, I'm going to cover it with a piece of backing clay. And when you stretch something like this out and the white gets thinner, colors behind it may show through, especially if you have any translucent clay. So I'm going to use white. Rolled to a 5 or 6 on the Atlas machine. Patty paper. Press out my air. Trim off my excess. Now we can stretch this out. But if we put this through our pasta machine, what's going to happen is it's going to get wider. Your end stripes will get really wide and flare out. So in order to fix that problem, we're going to add some clay to each side. Now, I probably should have done this beforehand. This is the black side. I'm going to just go ahead and give it 2 layers because this is kind of about where I'm at. And this side was the white side. And the reason I do this is so that when you put it through your pasta machine, you're using the full width of your pasta machine. Now I'm going to measure my pasta machine. And my pasta machine is 5 3/4 wide. And so what I'm trying to do is have some pure black and some pure white on each end. So we'll move it over that way a little bit. I need it right there. 5 3/4. That way, this is the full width of my pasta machine. I need to get that attached a little better. Now this will fit in my pasta machine end to end, and these blocks on the end will act as buffers so the lines don't stretch out or don't flare out wide on the ends. And this was my first pass. I'm going to run it through again, and that was on the thickest setting. That was my second pass, and that is on a number 2 setting. And that's on a number 4 setting, but you can see how straight my lines and how even they are. Always use buffers at the sides of your clay sheet. Now I can back this whole sheet again and stretch it longer. I'm not going to right now. The principle was that I showed you how to stretch this out and keep your line straight. I'm going to trim this off. And I'm going to store this for right now on a plastic deli sheet. So now I can incorporate that, and I also want to mark it. This is a number 4 on my pasta machine. That way I will know. That's my number 4 setting. So if I go to combine this with other pieces or butt pieces next to each other, I know where I need to be. I have a Skinner blend here that I'm going to roll into a jelly roll. And I'm going to show you how to use quickly stripes on the outside of a cane. So I have my bullseye plug, and I have 3 slices at a number 2 turns on my Lucy slicer. And I'm just going to wrap this cane with these slices. And my cane's a little taller, so I'm going to start with it flat on the table and get the first cane evenly around it. You can see that's at the bottom. And we'll add our next stripe. And if you look through old polymer clay books and all types of polymer clay art, you will see white and black dotted lines and striped lines used in a lot of ways. They make a nice break in contrast. Now we have to add this last slice. And it goes just about there. So I need to cut that white away and leave the white that's there. So first I'm going to make sure it's stretched. I'm going to double check one more time. That's the white I need to cut away. And I'm going to cut that. Now I have 2 choices. I can cut right up to that black, or I can cut and leave all the white, or I can cut half this white off and cut down the middle, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to arch my blade just to make sure I get a nice straight cut, separating my whites. My edge is straight. And arch my blade the little bit I need to. And cut away that piece of extra white. That'll be fine. Now, I kind of wiggled that side. I'll use the back of my blade and straighten that up. Then insert my white, my 2 half whites together. I'll use my acrylic block. Now I'm not going to reduce this or anything. I just wanted to show you how to wrap a cane with stripe sheets. Get a cut there. Very soft, warm clay, but you get the idea. Let me take another little slice off of there. There you go. And these are so usable in so many ways. You can add them onto your veneer sheets, reduce it down into smaller sizes. I used the stripes where they met the buffer clay in black to make this little heart cutout pin, and added a few slices of my wrapped striped cane. If you visit my YouTube page, I have a tutorial for this beautiful striped veneer that I then turn into these triangles and hexagons with my Create template. It's a free video, so please enjoy it. Okay, in this part of the video, we're going to talk about extrusions for string veneers or striped veneers. A couple little quick points, and I'm not going to show you how to use an extruder. I'm sure you all know this is a Lucy extruder I'm using, which comes with a plug. So you have to put the clay in and put the plug behind it. These are the discs I use for extruding strings. And they're different size holes. And some of them have multiples. And what you have to do with the multiples is use the large one over top of the multiple holes so that you get a single hole. And you just stack them together in the extruder if you want a string that small. This one doesn't work for that, but it's good for making lots of grass or hair. So, a little thing about extruders. We'll have clay, and the disc will be in the end of the extruder. So what happens? The extruder's filled, and you have all these discs of color lined up. The path of least resistance is the hole. So, as the clay gets pressed from the back, clay's going to start coming out of the hole, and all that clay is pushing from the center of the stack of discs. The color that's the first disc will start coming out, but some of it pushes up to the outside of the tube and then follows the outside of the clay backwards. So it's like a loop. The easiest clay comes out. So we can use that to make, in a sense, a Skinner blend extrusion. If you line your colors up in the order of the rainbow and you extrude it, the first part, if we're just using one disc of each color, would be pretty much start out yellow, turn orange, and then turn fuchsia, and then it would turn purple, and then cyan, which is turquoise. I'm using the CYM color mixing colors, magenta or fuchsia. This is zinc yellow, but you could use cad yellow. And this is turquoise or cyan. These are primo clays. So we're just going to take, if you have a cutter that's about the size of your extruder, that's great. This one I have is a little smaller, and that's good too. So I'm going to cut a few circles. I cut a few circles of each one, and we're going to stack them in the order of the rainbow. So I have yellow, then fuchsia, then turquoise, then yellow, then fuchsia, then turquoise, then yellow, then fuchsia, then turquoise. Press those down a little bit. Now I'm going to cheat. Since I have such a little bit of clay. And I'm going to put my plug in this end instead of starting from the other end. And my clay. Starting with the yellow at the outside edge. as I was saying before, if you extrude a single string, the colors flow into each other, and the first color wraps back around, and it makes like a skin on the whole string. But when you start using multi-hole discs, that changes everything. And extruding clay is mixing clay. It's as much mixing clay as making a rainbow Skinner blend in the pasta machine. And if you use a multi-hole disc, you will be mixing it even more. So I'm going to use this 4-hole multi-disc to extrude this clay. I got my clay in there. I'm going to press it out to the end and make sure I have any air out. And you can do this with any one of these sizes. I'm just wanting some color mixing for a stringed pattern. And you can see the yellow starts traveling along the whole outside edge. And as you get to the back, your colors start to get muddy. That's why I only used that little bit. If I had used a stack of discs this long, by the time I get to the end, everything's mixed into really muddy colors. Cut my strings off. Immediately turn your handle backwards and loosen both caps. That way your caps won't walk up, and I'll take care of cleaning this out later. So now I have 4 strings, and I'm going to cut them into smaller pieces. Let me get a bigger blade. And they're about 1.5 to 2 inches long. I don't know if you can see it or not, but you can see how the colors change inside. The different areas, they're different colors. So we're going to take a random sampling of these. So let's do 1, and I'm going to line them up in a striped pattern. No particular order. Okay, so now that I have my strings all cut and stacked together, I'm going to just give it a little smooth. And back here there's a couple overlaps, but that's all right. I'm going to cut those off. Just a light smooth. I don't want to squish the end ones flat. And we're going to just get rid of that for now. You can see all those different colors. And if you need little dots for anything, you can always take little tiny cuts off of an extruded rainbow thing and have nice little dots. Okay. A little more smoothing here. Then I have some of this gray clay that I had, and I want to make sure it's the same height, and it is. And I'm going to do as we did before. I'm going to make a buffer on each end so that my strings don't stretch out. You have our ruler. If you remember, my pasta machine was 5 3/4 inches. So I'll leave some buffer there on the end. That's 0. That's 5 3/4. I better move over a little bit more. Because we're only using this much, the rest is just buffer. And I'm going to slide underneath of this and release it. I have a thin sheet for my backing, about a 5 or a 6 on my Atlas pasta machine. And we're going to hopefully get that on there. Connect all the sheets. And I'm just going to trim off some of this excess here. Now, all of these colors here are in here. So if you wanted to take a little bit of this, this scrap, you could mix it into one brown color and mix a tiny bit into your white if you wanted to have something like your earrings backed with a complementary color. I'm going to run this through the pasta machine and I will show you the steps in between as it stretches out. You will see this is turning. You can start seeing the colors come through. And that was run through a number 2, then a 3, then a 4, then a 5 on my Atlas. And this is just random varied colors. You can plan, if you use individual colors extrusions, you can stack them in an order however you like. Now I'm going to get some more clay to back this with. And this would be my backing color. Because remember, the gray is going to get cut away. It's not part of our sheet. So I'm going to take some white clay here and add a tiny bit of my rainbow mix in there. And we'll make a nice color for the back. Okay, so now I have a nice backing sheet. And since these are already straightened enough and smushed together, we don't really have to worry about them anymore. So I'm going to use my patty paper and smooth these two sheets together, making sure there's no air. And I can remove my gray. And I'll continue to stretch this longer and we'll see what happens. Now this creamy white had a little tiny bit of all the colors from that mixed in. It's a good way to harmonize your back and front. And I'm going to roll this. This is about a 3 now. I'm going to run this on a 4 and probably a 5. You can see how beautiful the colors come out. And this looks like a nice fall palette. If you have your circle disc of the 3 colors and you rearrange the order, your colors may be a little different. Or if you use red instead of fuchsia, you'll get a little bit different color. This is a number 5 right now. You can see how beautiful all the colors are. I really wanted to keep it at a number 4, so I'm going to back it with another sheet of clay. There's my backing color. Whenever you're doing this also, you want to use white or a very light color, because the thinner the clay gets, the more the backing color will shine through. So I will back this and have it ready for a project at the end of the tutorial. This is a number 5 and this is a number 5. Okay. Now I will roll this through on a number 4. So you can see how much color we got out of such little bit of clay. And there might be an air bubble there, but we can take care of that later. I'm going to cut this in half and store it on one of my deli sheets. I show you later in the class how I made these earrings using my black and white and striped veneer, but I just wanted to show them here. For my next veneer, I'm going to make a chopped mix starting out with these leftover pieces from my previous color plus a little bit of white. They're all about equal amounts, and that's probably way more than I need. Okay, so I have my colors all chopped, and that's fuchsia, cad yellow, turquoise, and white. And I'm going to press this into a log to fit into my extruder. And that's a lot of clay. Way more than I'll need to make a lot of veneer, but we'll go with it. Now these will mix in a different way. 1, because I have white in them. And 2, because the colors are already chopped and random. They're not in a specific order. In this veneer, if you follow a color line, like this yellow line, you can see how the color changes through the lines. This will be a more variegated pattern. I'm going to load my extruder and I'll be right back. Okay, I have my extruder loaded, and because we're working with small jewelry size patterns, you want to work smaller than you would think, because running these sheets through the pasta machine expands the pattern. Now I'm going to use this odd one here that doesn't actually have a center hole. And I'm going to extrude this out, and then I'll be back. Always loosen your caps immediately. Don't ever over tighten your handle. Okay, now you can see, because I added that white, we have a much different color palette, even though it's the same exact colors. There's some beautiful purples in here that don't really show up here. Now these are a lot thinner strings too. I'm going to fold them in half. And if they break, just leave them about the same length. They're very, very delicate. Okay, so now I got these kind of lined out and a little bit separated. And I'm going to try to move them close together. Alrighty, one more. Alright, these are pretty much straight. And they're as close as I can get them reasonably. Okay, I have a piece of white clay here, and it's almost as wide as my strings. I'm going to move them a little closer together, but keeping them in order in separate lines. See how I'm pulling slightly tight, just to straighten them out. I'm going to put my good side of my clay onto them and press. Use a deli plastic sheet and get them all attached. Use my blade, release them. And there's what I have. Now these are textured. You can use them like that for a veneer, and I will keep half of it that way, or a section. That's enough for a pair of earrings. I'll keep that way, and the rest I'll run through the pasta machine. That's going through on a number 2, and then this is a number 4. There's my before. And then here's my after. And you can see how the colors will be more pastel the farther you stretch them. I made this bangle using that veneer, and the blue veneer on the inside I show you at the end of the class. Before we get into our next striped patterns, I wanted to talk a little bit about making metallic clays in your own color palette. I use Primo clays, which have a lot of translucent in their base, so they're great for making colors that flow into each other. However, they've taken away so many of the colors that they used to have. I have to make my own. I use pinata inks to change the colors of 18 karat gold or white pearl Primo clay. It takes quite a bit of ink, and when the ink is mixed in, it does not fade. Over 10 years of working with it this way, I have not had any fading problems. My full color recipes are included with the purchase of my String Theory Workshop course tutorial. Contact me on Facebook. Just remember, roll your clay out, apply your ink, and let it fully dry. Then mix it in. Mix well. You can use these metallic mixes to make all types of string patterns and effects. You can even use gold, copper, and bronze metallic colors for these effects also. Ornament metallics are beautiful for this process, and they come in many colors. They are denser and harder to extrude and highly pigmented. Ceramic colors tend to come out into a more muted palette, and they need to be diluted because of their high pigment. I use Primo translucent to dilute them with, as well as clay softener. Okay, now we're going to make a different type of striped veneer with metallic clays and translucent. And this veneer can be stretched over a sheet of white or gray or tan, and that little bit of difference of background color will change the colors of your clay to a point. Now, if you put it over something like black, it will really change them to the point you almost don't see them. So keep that in mind. These are all Primo clays, and unfortunately, Primo has discontinued clay colors repeatedly. I think the only ones that are available now are the purple pearl and the green pearl. They recently discontinued the dark blue pearl, and they've now replaced it with a pastel version, which is pretty much worthless to me for this process. This is actually 18 karat gold pearl that I have tinted to be a bright yellow. This is the old magenta pearl. This is the old blue pearl, and I usually add a little white to it because it was so dark blue. And this is my custom orange. Basically, I'm using either white pearl or 18 karat gold. These two have a lot of translucence to their base, so they're easy to change. So for the orange and the yellow, I make those with 18 karat gold. For the blue, and the magenta, I use the white pearl. Now, having said that, you can use other colors, and you don't have to use all these colors. You could do a yellow, orange, magenta range of colors with this. You don't have to use the full rainbow. You could add copper to yellow and orange, and even the bronze color to make a fall palette version of this. You could add the darker gold to give you a different version. But what we're going to be doing, we're going to be stacking these colors with translucence in between each color. That will stretch the colors and make them translucent. So, just a little bit more about mixing the colors with my Primo 18 karat gold and white. I use Pinata inks. They are the most highly pigmented ones I found. They go a lot farther. They give you brighter colors. And for instance, 18 karat gold plus Senorita Magenta and Sunbright Yellow give you this nice bright orange. And it is a bright orange. When you're mixing these, you spread your clay out, you put your ink on, and you let it fully dry. Then you mix it in. Then you let it rest for a while, and then you mix it some more before you determine whether you want more colors. Because these dyes, once they dry, they're like little shards of color, and they break up. So when you first mix them, they may not all be dissolved into the clay. So that's why you let it rest and then remix. Okay, so getting back to my discs. So these are normal discs I use, and how I determine the thickness of clay. Usually the disc I'm using, like this one, we're going to be putting translucent clay between each one of these colors. And usually this is thicker. And it's usually the thickness of the whole of my disc. The colors I usually do a little thinner. And the thinner you go, the less color you will have. These are at a number 1. These are a number 2. And I might go down to a number 4. If you're using a thin disc like this, so say this would be a number 4. If you rolled this clay out on number 4, I would roll this fairly thin, like a 6 or a 7. It's enough to blend the colors through, and you will see. So, the first thing we're going to do is stack our colors, and I always go in the order of the rainbow. And we're going to start with translucent, then yellow, translucent, then orange, translucent, then magenta, translucent, then purple, translucent, then blue, translucent, then bright green pearl, translucent, and then I always do a yellow on the end. That makes the whole rainbow. And I'll put a translucent on the end, and sometimes I'll add a second translucent at the beginning. All right, and that's enough for a lot of veneer. So I'm going to extrude this. It will be going into the extruder with the yellow, then orange end at the end of the extruder. And I'm using my second largest single hole disc. Normally I'd probably go smaller because we're going to stretch this onto a veneer, but I want you to be able to see on camera. And I'll be back. Okay, here's my extrusion, and you can see how the colors, just like a Skinner blend that you line up in a rainbow fat order, you get the same thing. That's why I say extruding clay is like blending clay, like making a rainbow Skinner blend. So here are all my colors, and you can see at the very end, it goes into green and the yellow, and then I get this funky color. But if you look at the very end of that, it's actually the final color, the yellow. This red is on the outside. And it's just, so usually I cut it off at that point, that little bit that's muddy. So I know what I'm working with. So now, I'm going to cut off the front. I can see translucent up to about there where the yellow starts. There's a little bit of yellow. And then the yellow would get thicker and thicker and less translucent. So this is going to be used for translucent stripes, but with white in between them. That way when you make something like a pair of earrings, we're going to have color, color, and then white, color, white, color, white. So that when you make a pair of earrings, the colors are going to let the light through, but the white won't. Here's a sample earring, sanded and hand buffed to a soft shine. It really allows the light to glow when it comes through the translucent clay. And you could use tan or one of your muted colors. You can change, like I said before, you can change these colors. If you're using these bright colors, you want to use them in the order of the rainbow. But if you're using like the copper and the golds and the pearl, you can mix them around. Just remember, one color will mix into the next. So if you're using just those copper colors and maybe with yellow and orange, mix them up, scatter them around. You'll get a different result every time. So take a picture of your lineup so that when you make something and you really like it, you can remember how you lined it up. I'm going to extrude this white clay and I'll be right back. Okay, I have my white extruded at the same size disc. And in case I didn't say it earlier, all this clay is very soft. I added extra clay softener to my translucent clay, but everything was fairly soft, not sticky, gooey, but it didn't crack when I folded it, or the edges of the sheets. The edges of the sheets when I went through the pots machine weren't cracking. So it's pretty soft. So now I have my white and my rainbow color. And we're going to get a clean tile. I have a clean tile here. Now, just like we made our frame on our black and white sheet, we want to have a buffer of white on both ends of our rainbow setup. Because sometimes, like if you're going to make an earring, I want to start with, some more white and then go into the rainbows. Sometimes I want it just all rainbows, but I usually leave extra at both ends. And supposing I'm going to use this cutter to make earrings, that will determine my width of sheet. Now, if I try to use this whole long sheet string, I won't get enough color change in that short of range. So the first thing I'm going to do, let me move this, and I'm holding this very gently. And another little secret, if you want your clay to be flawless, your white clay, good luck. But a thing you can do is if you add the tiniest bit of brown or black or gold embossing powder, I'm talking just a tiny fingerprint touched to the surface, that little bit of speckle will hide any dirt. You can see this brooch has black embossing powder mixed into the white clay. One thing to be careful of, only mix enough of what you're going to use. Allowing the embossing powder to sit in raw clay will dissolve slowly into the clay, causing the white clay to turn a gray or purplish color, and your dots will be smaller. So, I'm going to get a piece of white clay to start my buffer. And that's just going to be the start of my sheet. And watch for a little, if you hear your extruder pop when you're extruding, that means there's an air bubble. And usually you'll see them there crack. So just make sure if you're cutting things apart, you cut at that air bubble. So I'm going to start this one here. And get it straight on there first. Now, back to the colors here. I'm going to make a stripe every other one, but if I use all this yellow, I'll be down to here and still be yellow. Now, I'm going to say I'm going to make one, there's a kink right here, so I'm going to cut that kink out. So I'm going to use about 2 inches, because that's more than enough for my earrings. And this is not going to get stretched out as long. So that will be my yellow band. And if you see, that's yellow and that's orange. So there will be some color change. Then I will do my white again. And then this time I'm going to go down more into the orange color. And you can see the end of that is orange, but the other end starts turning red. Always keep your strings in order also. And you can tell, like this one is more yellow and a tiny dot of orange, and this is a little yellow and a lot of orange. So this was the end that was coming out first. So keep them in order so you know what you're doing. And I would usually have several tiles lined up and be doing multiples at once. Now I also got to keep in mind how big my earring is. This is a thicker hole than I would normally use for this, but I wanted the thickness of my earrings. So there's yellow, there's orange. Keeping this in order, I'm going to go more farther down. And I'm kind of smoothing these straight every time. I'm not squishing them. You don't want to dent these. Okay, so let's go to the next purple range. It's starting to get blue. See, I have enough over here for a whole nother setup. And then I'll do a little bit of that last part there. You can rearrange these, you know, it's up to you. With the white in between, you're fine. You know, whatever arrangement of colors. Now I'm going to put several of these. And then I'll do one more just in case. I'd rather have a little extra buffer there. The more you have these colored stripes with buffer on each end, the less they will get spread out. Usually it only spreads out at the edges. And then I'm going to put a few on this end. And at this point, if your clay is dirty, you know, it's fine because you're going to sand into it. I have some dust on my table here. All right. Well, that table was dirty. There's a lot of dirt on this. That's all right. It'll sand right off because it's just on the surface. Okay, so now I definitely have enough to capture all the colors in my earring if it doesn't splay out too wide. Or I can capture, you know, white on the top or the bottom or both. So I'm going to stop there with that white buffer. I'm going to turn this way. Press it in a little. Got a clean deli sheet. And I'm just going to run my fingers, and I'm running them not in the crevices, I'm running them on the tops of the colors. And the tops of the whites. I'm just trying to start smashing them to a point where they're all stuck together. And just keep rubbing them, just gently. Maybe move your paper, you can see how the lines get on the paper. Move them to a fresh spot. You want to get it all good and flat. Try not to crunch down the ends, maybe a little just to connect them. We'll probably be cutting that off anyway. And just keep smoothing and replacing your paper. Now I'm going to live dangerously after I burnish this a little bit more. Paper. This is a burnisher. I'm just trying to smooth and flatten it. Another thing you can do to help the process is release it from your tile. And then start over again. That gets the tension out of the clay and allows it to smooth together. And you basically, you're going to smooth this until you get clay all connected into one smooth sheet. Do not make dent marks. Don't push like that. Always just rub back and forth. And when you get it to a certain point, and I don't know where, I got a lot of dust on my clay, you can flip it over and do a little bit on that side. And I'm going to chance it, but what you really want to do is normally do your buffer. So you'd have wide clay out to here. I'm going to wing it. Pray for me. I'm going to run this through the thickest setting. This is going to be the thickness of my earring, so I don't want to go too thin. And I don't want to have to back it. So I went through my thickest setting and it didn't really change it that much. I'm going to go down to number 1. And there's number 1. Still didn't change it that much. Now there's number 2. Now, I can see this through here. The light's coming through. I can't really show it to you on camera. But I want to smooth it some more because I want it stuck very well to each other. Smooth out my plastic wrap. And I don't really want to go much thinner than this. Now these will need sanded because, as I explained to you before, when you extrude, that first color sort of makes a skin the whole way down. And these need a little more smoothing to get rid of any spaces between the lines. So another thing I can do, I can take a stiff blade and I can pull these back in. And then smooth some more. Now, if you can't get your lines all the way smooth, you can start with just buffer clay, but make sure your buffer clay is the same thickness when you start as your strings. This now is much thinner than that. So I'm going to leave it because I think my earring's going to just get into that first string anyway. And I might use a different cutter. This cutter is about the same. height-wise, but I like this shape. So I need to line these up. So I'm going to pull it towards me for a second till I line these up. There's a little bit of a scratch on there, so I'm going to burnish this a little bit more and work it out. If you have a clean rod, and this one I just washed, not with alcohol. There's a little bit more. Now you can see why I want really soft clay for this, because you want your clay to smooth together. All right, so once again, I got to pull this towards me so I can see. And they look the same to me. These are a left and a right. Okay. I use an acrylic block. I've broken cutters because I pressed too hard in one spot. And these were very expensive. They're very nice and very sharp. Just a little wiggle. Let's separate my white so I can reuse it. And another thing you can do too, you can see how these pieces are coming apart. You can let this sheet rest a while because clay likes to stick to itself, and it will just make the bond even better. So I'm just going to give this a little smoothing burnish. Usually you want to rub with the lines because going across can actually make them wonky. But I'm rubbing very lightly, and these are ready to bake. All right, now I'm going to show you the next thing you can do. Here's another color layout of 18 karat gold, green pearl, peacock pearl, blue pearl, and purple pearl. After extruding and cutting up my strings, I randomly placed them between strings of translucent clay. My veneer was then laid on a white background. The top part of my veneer were the leftover pieces of strings, flattened between layers of translucent clay with a little embossing powder, and made into a little block cane. These type of string extrusion veneers must be sanded after baking to reveal the beauty of the metallic clays. Now these are translucent clay, so you may not want to use these for dots because while they look like a color now, like translucent clay, when it's baked, it will be more transparent. So depending on what you put it on, you won't know until you come out of the oven. And I usually do this with much thinner strings. But this would be something I would use an entire rainbow string for. And keeping things in order. And you can get a lot of veneer this way, especially if you're using that whole string to make a wide sheet. And I normally do this with the thin disc because these colors are going to spread. Now I have this string and I don't know which way it goes. So I'm looking at it. This side's a little oranger on the outside. Okay? I see orange on the outside, and then it's magenta, which we went from orange into magenta. Then it's blue in the center. If you look at this end, less magenta, more larger circle of blue. So this was the end that was first. That's how you keep them in order. And I will trim this when we're done and you'll see what I mean. Alright. Then we had the same thing. So we went magenta into blue, which made purple. And then we went, the yellow at the end made it green. So we have green and then a little bit of blue and then purple. So that one goes at this end because this end's more yellow, which was our last color. Okay, now imagine, well, let me first, this here. Imagine this was that whole entire string, and you cut a 1 or 2 inch piece off and kept them in order. That's why when I'm working with a smaller disc hole, I'm using much thinner clay, so my stack going into the extruder is only going to be that big, but I'm going to get this extremely long string. But you can see how the colors go in order. Now you could rearrange them if you like. But I like things neat and orderly. So, we're going to take this. And I'm going to do a buffer. I'm going to use my scrap gray. This over here. Now, I need to measure this. To my 5 3/4 inch because I have an Atlas 150. So I'm just about there. I'm just going to leave that. I'm almost right there. And smooth this. Now normally when I'm working with the thin skinny strings, this will be this wide because I have narrower strings, but there's a lot of them, because when you extrude a stack that tall with the 6 colors, but even though they're thinner, coming through that smaller hole, you get a lot. And I'm talking like this one with the ring on top, so you have a single hole. If you don't use a single hole, your colors won't mix the same. This tiny little one, it's extremely small, too small to work with. So I would go, the smallest I would go would be that. Your stack of clay would be about that long, about 1 inch, but you will get a mile out of it. And if you put it in like 1.5 inches or 2 inches long and cut in the same rainbow order I did, you will have a sheet about that wide with just a little buffer on the end. Now I'm going to smooth this a little bit to get it started. because you're going to see how much clay this ends up being. All right, and I'm going to back it with white. I don't want to waste my white clay. So that will be the rest of my buffer. I don't want to smear up the surface. Give this just a little more of a rub. So that gray is a little thicker now than the rainbow part, but that's okay. Then I'm going to take this to my pasta machine and stretch it out long ways. Now this is a number 3. And I'm going to cut this in half just to show you the difference. Those are nice and bright. And you can see how bright my orange is. I always test bake a piece of my orange clay to make sure it doesn't fluoresce. So I'm going to keep most of this for later. And then we're going to use some white and stretch this out even farther. Let me get a piece here. That's definitely on my white. Let's move that together. And at this point, this gray should be enough of a buffer. I just don't like it spreading too wide. Sometimes I spread it wide on purpose though. The last one was a number 3, but now that I've added clay to the back, I have to reset to a higher number. Now that went up to a number, this went out to a number 4. And you can see the difference. Because we're using translucent clay, get a hold of it here, pull that off. Stripes got a little wider, but they're also brighter and less metallic looking. Now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to keep half of this for reference. And then I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to get rid of the buffer. Most of the veneers in this class, we are making very thin. There's very little room for much sanding. If you need to sand, start at a higher grit paper, but usually they look wonderful. And then I'm going to stretch this out even farther. Now at this point, between this and the last one, you can see the difference even more. So you can get a lot of mileage. I'm going to go again on this. Using clay that is leached as well as multiple burnishing through all the different steps in the process of the veneers really makes a nice surface. Okay, so now that's a number 1 again, put behind it, and I'll run it out some more. Now I stopped at a number 2. And you can see compared to the first one how the colors have changed and got more pastel because we're stretching them over white. If we were stretching them over a beige color, that would tone down. All of these colors would be more on the brownish side. I don't want to say brown, but it will tone the colors down. Now, one other thing I like to do with this kind of texture, let me get these pieces in order here. You can definitely see the difference. Now this is rainbow, okay? Not everyone likes rainbow, and I understand that. But you can see that what started out as an inch, we've stretched to this much veneer. Now we have a piece where the colors, like this blue line, it's the same the whole way across. So you could cut 3 or 4 pairs of 2 or 3 pairs of earrings out of this and have them all be exactly the same. Whereas on a shorter piece, now this was the second pass, you can see where the lines start to change colors. And that's fine for most people's purposes. I mean, I would use that much of that sheet. My other favorite thing to do with these, to stretch them even farther, is to texture them with sponge texture. Now this is cellular foam. And when I use it, I mist it with water very lightly off your table. This is my water bottle, which comes out like a fine mist. It doesn't feel that wet. I would just do half of this. And I'm going to run it through on the sponge. And I'm going to run it through on the sponge 5 times. And every time I do it, I'm going to pick it up and reposition it. This was on a number 2. I'm going to stay on a number 2. This is 3 passes. It makes a nice pebbly texture. I go back up here. I'm going to do 2 more passes. There you go. Now, I'm going to cut a pair of earrings out of here for you. Press it good to my tile with the sponge so I don't distort it. And just to show you a reference, that is untextured, and that is very textured. And I'm going to show you a couple of my really old pieces, but I want you to see how far I even stretched these colors out even farther till they were almost white. You can see on the back of this pendant how far I stretched the colors till they were very pale. Less so on the front components. Notice the bright orange. On the back of this pendant, I used scraps for the bail. On my bee pin, I used the white and colored stripes, but didn't stretch them very far. Here's some multi-versions of different colors of leaf combinations extruded separately, as well as one less stretched made into Bargello. And of course my leaf necklace. These are some scraps from replacing the white strings with translucent. Translucent strings combined with strings made from copper and several other metallic colors created this pendant that was first made into a cane and finished with 3 single strings of metallic and translucent clays. I'm going to use these cutters from Create Along. They're very sharp, a nice basic shape. You got to watch for the flares. I'm actually going to straighten that. I'm going to pull it a little bit till it's, I see the center line is straight. And I'm looking at the center line. Make sure my tip near the yellow is fine. I have the same amount of yellow at the bottom. There we go. Nice, beautiful, summery, bright stripes. Like I said, you add other colors into this and just use part of the rainbow with gold or copper, or just yellow, orange, and magenta. Now you can see, I hope you can see, this orange is pretty fluorescent. It's pretty bright. It may get pinker when you bake it. So that's why I test my clay. When I make my orange, I always bake a little piece, and I usually stretch it over top of white to see what happens. And if it is too yellow or too fluorescent, add a little more gold clay to it, or a little more yellow ink. But you'll see in the recipe. And I just wanted to show you from one extrusion string. Now these will be sanded. They won't get brighter or lighter, maybe a little, but they won't get bright like that. That's a very thin layer of color on top of white. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little trick here. I'm going to put up a picture of a pair of leaf earrings. The orange side of this was made with magenta, orange, 18 karat gold, and yellow with translucent in between. The other side was made with silver, black graphite, very thin, copper, bronze, 18 karat gold, and regular gold, and translucent. I make these in various colors. The hard thing to figure it out is how to cut your clay so that you can make leaves with veins going using a stringed pattern like this. Now, I'm going to use this for one half. Now, first thing I'm going to do is get a small square of paper, just slightly bigger than your leaf shape. And these are different sizes. And I'm going to fold it in half. And this does not have to be perfect. And any leaf cutter you have, you can do this with. So now I'm going to put my leaf, it's on the fold. I might draw that in for you so you can see it. Okay, so my leaf is on the fold, top to bottom, my main vein. Then I'm looking at, so like this leaf is probably the most prominent one on this small cutter. So my angle of my veins should be going like that. So I'm going to put a dot at the right there down on the paper and follow it to the middle of the line and probably continue on through to the other side of the cutter. All right, so that basically gives me the angle of my leaf veins. And this, like I said, I would rather do this with a pencil. I don't want it getting on my clay. So now, I have this striped piece of clay. And I'm going to take another striped piece of clay. I'm going to use a piece of this. And I'm going to make a funky looking leaf. So, when you do this, you have to do 2 cuts. Because when we cut this angle, and I'm going to put it right there, this is where I'm going to cut. All right, so I line my vein leaves up with my stripes. Okay, I'm coming over here so I can make a cut. Now, I should not be working on acrylic. Not a good idea. I like working on my cardstock. So, I've cut this, but it doesn't matter. This is one-sided because it's backed, but it doesn't matter which way I turn this unless I can flip it over, at which point I'm just going to put some lines on there so you can see. If I could flip it over, then I would have the right pattern of veins, but I can't do that on this one because I have it backed. I could do that on a sheet that was just solid stripes all the way through, like a cane slice off of this, you know, that was run to the thickness I needed. So, since I can't match these, I would need to do, this cut was here, I would need to do another cut the other direction. I'm going to do that and show you. Okay, so now I switch these two. I now am able to cut a leaf with the colors and the lines going on the right angles for the cutter. I really wanted to try this. Nah. I don't know, that might look cool. Anyway, we're going to do this for right now. So I'm going to get another tile. And since this is my main piece, and that makes one. And I'm not trying to be perfect with these. A piece of patty paper. I'm going with my lines, my color lines, and then I'm going one thing. Now this isn't going to be enough to burnish this, but I'm going to show you another little trick. For you earring makers out there that like to do everything in one step and be done. And this is in my earring tutorial. My 1 bake 0 sanding earring tutorial is available at createalong.com. You can see the fronts and backs are done all in 1 bake. So I got that pretty well smushed together. Now this is a thin sheet. This is like a number 3 or a 4, and it's way too thin. So I'm going to back it, and for fall, it's already on white, so I don't have to worry about another color coming through. I'm going to use some of my tan clay from earlier. This color was made from the scraps from regular opaque clay from the first part of my class. This color is more from the range from the metallics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little piece of this, and I am going to get some Primo Gold. And I could use it just like this, but I have very little scrap that I actually throw away because I work in a way that I keep my colors separated while I'm working. And there's a hair. So I'm going to add a little bit of this regular gold, Primo gold, not the 18 karat gold, to this little bit of gray clay, and that'll make my backing, because of the translucence in that and the metallics, it'll go better with my earring. Okay, I like that color much better. It may not show up on camera. There's just a little bit of sheen. It's a nice caramel color. When I work, I usually do a run. I don't want to say production work, but like if I'm going to make something, I will make, 10 or 20 pairs, say it was earrings, 10 or 20 pairs of the same sheets of clay, and then all that scrap will go to make all my backing. And that's how I use up a lot of my scrap. I never mix, 6 colors together to make a mess. And this is like on a number 3 on my atlas. And I am going to also texture this. Get some water. And this is a little trick from my earring video. I'm going to texture this. Okay, I ran this through 5 times with my moistened sponge. Boy, the dog hairs are just everywhere today. Anyway, this will be my backing clay. And this is same sponge, ran it through 5 times. And it's still kind of damp. I want to let it dry a little bit. Once it's dry, I have a nice clean tile here. Let it dry all the way. And if there's anything marks on here, like there's a little bit of crud from a previous something in the pasta machine. And we're going to lay this on our sponge so we don't mess it up. And then we're going to, get our paper, and we're going to, same thing, attach it to your backing clay. This way I'm not messing up my texture. Cut the excess off of here. Now, I'm going to take this. I need a clean paper. My back is textured. It's dry. My tile is clean. And just, I'm going to lightly burnish that. I want it to stick to the tile, because when I cut it, I want it to stay there. Okay. And let's see, I'm going to use the larger one. Then I'm going to line this up and cut my 2 earrings. There's a fiber on there. And I'm not trying to have them be matchy-matchy. I am, though, trying to get that centered. Okay, and there's my first one. You can see it still had a little moisture in there, so it moved. And I didn't want to mess up my back, so I'm going to be very, very careful. Usually when I do that, you have to let all the moisture get out of there. This is my worst nightmare, having to push an earring out of a cutter. I'm going to mist my cutter with water. I'm going to line this one up. Looking at that center line going right down the middle of the leaf. And pray that it sticks to the tile, not my cutter. No, my clay sheet was still too damp on the bottom. That doesn't happen in real life. So, in real life, after I cut my earrings out, they would have been stuck to the tile with the framing clay all around them, okay? And at that point, before I removed my framing clay, I would very lightly burnish, and it would be going, it would be like doing this with the cutout pieces in there. Because what that does, and then I would remove my clay. What that does, it keeps your shape. It keeps the shape of your earrings, but it allows you to flatten it out because when you press your cutter, you always get that rounded edge. So it allows you to flatten them a little better. And I'm going to just go a little bit more on these. And these may or may not get sanded. I'm a sanding fanatic, but we will see. There you go. Those are going to be really nice. Very simple. There's so much design you can do with stripes. You see it in fashion everywhere. Look around. You probably have 100 pieces of clothes with stripes on it. I decided to go ahead and make some black and white stripes and rainbow stripe earrings. I cut out my triangles from each sheet, and then I swapped out the pieces. After doing that, I checked for orientation for my leaf pattern, and then I backed them with white clay. After burnishing, after applying to my tile and burnishing very well, I aligned my cutters. Cutting out both shapes, wiggling while you're cutting, will give you better shapes, and make sure you have a clear cut. After you get both shapes cut, don't forget to burnish flat, just lightly, to flatten the tops of the earrings. Then you can remove your burnishing sheet and your waste clay. Burnishing before you remove it really makes them nice and flat. And there you have it. 2 very cool earrings. I can't wait to make more. These 2 pairs of earrings were my actual unbaked ones. Unfortunately, I burnt them, so I had to remake them for the video ending. I just wanted to show you another thing with stripes. If you've ever been to my YouTube channel, I have a free YouTube called Stripey Block Canes. And these are very similar to Donna Cato's Starry Night canes. The only thing I do differently is I intentionally make these colors. She generally uses scrap or leftover cane ends. I go through the whole color wheel using a certain number of colors and can make a block with the scraps. I make the next block with the scraps. I make the next block, and then I work my way around the color wheel. I did this for a project, not realizing it was the same as her Starry Night canes. But anyway, on my YouTube channel, you can go see the YouTube how to make these. One thing nice about these blocks, there's a stripe side and there's a speckle side. Stripe, speckle. This is my Build a Snowman class on createalong.com. You can see I use the stripy block canes for the hats and the scarves. They can be used to make sheets for veneers with quilt squares of different patterns. They have so many uses to add into your projects. So if you go to createalong.com, you can also see my create template, which I use to make all those veneers. Now I took 3 nice thick slices, even on my slicer, and I'm going to put them together and check for the most different color range I can get where they meet. And then, like my other ones, I'm going to run this out into a thinner slab. And I will probably put it on top of this. This clay color was my scrap from this, which is black and white, which makes gray. And then the rainbow of colors, which makes that same tan color. So I had some extra scrappy white there. I mixed that together, then I added some turquoise, which is in this cane already. So that is going to be my coordinating backing. So I'm going to stretch this sheet out onto some of this. Here is my sheet after I stretched it out, and I'm rebacking it on another layer of the turquoise backing sheet. And here's my veneer stretched out, so I have all of this veneer to work with. There's my back color. I have a long tile here, which I'm probably going to work on, but for right now, I'm going to work on a piece of clean cardstock. And I'm going to set that out of the way for a second. And I'm going to show you a little template I made. This is just cardstock. They're 1/2-inch strips. And I cut a few of those, and I cut a piece of scrap for the top. And to measure them, I take another 1/2-inch strip, and I get one straight and tape down. Then I put one next to it. Then I tape the next one down, and so on. So this should be enough. This is more than enough for my sheet, I believe. Yeah. All right, so the reason why I'm using a 1/2-inch strip, I'm using a 1/2-inch cutter. All right, so there's my 1/2-inch cutter. Now, just for security's sake, I'm going to fold this over and just tape it down shut. Just to give myself a little more security that it's not going to fall apart on me. All right, so now the reason I'm using cardstock is I want the clay to stick a little bit, but I don't want it to stick all the way because I'm going to be cutting circles out of this, and I want them to come out easily so I don't distort them. So I am going to just smooth this clay sheet to this cardstock, trying not to put wrinkles in it. Not so hard that it gets pressed into the fibers of the paper, just to stick it down. Okay, so then I have my template. I'm going to start up here where there's no waste clay. I'm going to tape this down so it doesn't move on me. And if I want, I'll put a piece of tape across the bottom here, just for stability. And then I have 1 extra 1/2 inch strip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just use my template and cut circles. And if they come out, gently push them out. I was hoping they wouldn't, but it's fine if they do. And then I'm going to put my 1/2 inch strip, leaving a space. And you could use a smaller space here. But what this is going to give us is an optical illusion. Okay, I have these cut. I'm down to my tape here, that's why I stopped. Tape is going to stick to the clay. I'll just gently pull it off. I've never had tape stick to clay before, but okay. Must be the brand. Now this is what we have. Now, this is called a bud setter tool. It's made by Kemper Cutters. It's a K43 bud, B-U-D, as in flower bud, setter. It has 2 needles. You can see that. And it just really makes picking up clay easy. Now I'm going to turn this way. And what we're going to do, we're going to pick these up and we're going to put them back in the holes, but we're turning them 90 degrees. Now this is just one step. We're going to move our template over a row. So there it is there. And I want to make sure that I'm in the right place. And just move it over a row. Then I'm going to be very careful and double check this. Okay, now we're going to take our cutter again. So I'm going to start again here and do these 2 middle rows. Okay, now I'll insert the rest of these. Alright, so I'm going to cut this excess off here. In hindsight, I should have continued working on my paper until I had all the circles cut and replaced. Now I'm lightly putting a sheet on there, and I'm going to cut between all these rows. I don't think I need the template now. Alrighty. Some of my original ones fell out, but that's okay. I can put them back in. In hindsight, I should have continued working on my cardstock until I had all the circles placed. Nope. I'm going to stop there and burnish this, so hopefully you get the illusion effect. It doesn't seem to happen until you can see it coming through. Loosen this up from my sheet. That'll allow me to burnish it more. It's funny how the illusion looks through the paper, but you can't see it on the raw clay yet. So I'm going to back this with a sheet of clay. Okay, I have my sheet burnished to my backing sheet, which was burnished to my tile. And I'm just going to go ahead and give this just a little bit of a roll in different directions. Hopefully you can see the pattern come up. These type of patterns need to be seen as a group and look great on things like bowls or book covers or anything with a larger surface. You can freehand this, but I'm more of a mathematical person and I like templates. And if I was smart, I would just make a stencil that I could sit over top of my clay sheet and cut the circles out that way. There we go. My workhorse blade, they're long and they're really stiff. It's a little wonky, so I'm just going to pull the rows that way and pull the rows that way. And I can also set them down, keeping them straight as I go. But this is a great pattern to use on something like a tin box, or you can make this sheet as big as you like. That's the other thing nice about it. Roll this out a little bit. And there you go. There's a nice 3D effect. Optical illusion. These are a few samples of things I've made with my Create temp using the same types of stripe sheets as I did for my turquoise 3D illusion veneer. Even scraps work great. This bracelet, made by Jana Honarova, was a beautiful example. This is the heart pin I made at the beginning of my tutorial, as well as the bracelet with the blue interior. I was really happy how my bracelet turned out, using the striped sheet and the interior blue turquoise optical illusion sheet. I made this Donna Kato style two-sided ring from scrap pieces left from my sheet veneers, as well as these earrings. The tops are made from the tan scrap mixed from all my stripes. Here, this linen textured stretched out veneer over white. I will be making many more of these funky colored earrings with the black and white stripes. They're really fun and easy to make. If I didn't mention it earlier, all the pieces I was making in my video I burnt when I went to bake them. It happens. Anyway, this is the translucent extruded strings with light and without light behind them. They are sanded smooth. My scrappy block canes veneers can be married in different ways to make colorful, beautiful beads, earrings, and other jewelry. And my Create template using striped blocks can make all sorts of fun veneers. My Create template and other tutorials and tools are now available exclusively on createalong.com. You can get a free PDF of my snowflake tutorial on createalong.com also. My string theory workshop is a 4.5-hour private video class available directly from me on Facebook. Just message me on Messenger. My string theory workshop, as well as my minimal waste kaleidoscope cane workshop, are available in 2 or 3 day in-person retreat workshops. Please contact me on Facebook through Messenger if you'd like more information about my workshops. In my kaleidoscope cane workshop, we make beads with the scraps from our kaleidoscope canes, as well as earrings, trinket dishes, and pendants. After assembling your first or maybe your 50th kaleidoscope cane, I will show you my techniques for using them in different ways. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and share. I hope to see you in a live class someday. Thanks again. Be sure to check out all the links below the drop-down box in the video. Thanks again.